Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Tiffany Farrell, and I'm the president of Southern Maryland Audubon Society. Tonight, we have a free program online titled The Secret Life of Cardinals. The cardinal is one of our most recognizable and charismatic birds. Even John James Audubon praised it, writing, quote, "In richness of plumage, elegance, emotion, and strength of song, this species surpasses all its kindred." In this virtual program, Dr. Jodie Jawor will talk about the ecology and behavior of cardinals, drawing on her many years of studying them. Dr. Jawor received her bachelor's and master's degrees in biology from Ball State University and her Ph.D. in biology from the University of Dayton. Following her postdoctoral research at Indiana University, she was a faculty member at the University of Southern Mississippi. Currently, she is an affiliated researcher at New Mexico State University in Las Cruces and works at the National Science Foundation. She's also worked with Northern Cardinals at various locations in their eastern range, studying topics in behavioral ecology, behavioral endocrinology, and endocrine physiology. She has also worked with Pyrrhuloxia, a close relative of cardinals in New Mexico. Welcome, Dr. Jawor.
Thank you. And thank you for the invite to be here tonight, and welcome to everyone. And it's very exciting to see so many people who are excited to hear about Northern Cardinals. I love to talk about them. So I'm going to share my screen as I have nice presentation put together. So hopefully everyone can see this and it's coming across well. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to sprinkle some of my research findings in with what we know about general ecology of Northern Cardinals, focus a little bit more on the behavioral end of things, since that's where I've been working since the before times, back in did my PhD in the last century. It's really fun to be able to say things like that and just kind of blend the two together. So cardinals are, come on now, there we go. So cardinals are wildly popular. We already know that. And I just pulled this map, it's just showing a picture of the state birds, and you can see that, hopefully you see the mouse, the arrow moving around here. There's so many states that have the Northern Cardinal as their particular mascot, as their state bird, that you can almost see an entire Northern Cardinal here. And it's not just people out in the East in these particular states that really love cardinals. As we were talking about, as people were coming online, there's people out on the West Coast, out in the western half of the United States that are just, they just really want to see Northern Cardinals. Several years ago, not many, but several years ago, I went to a meeting in Australia, and I was in the Cairns area, and I was at an Airbnb, and I showed my hosts a picture of a Northern Cardinal, the species that I work with, and they were just blown away at this amazing. They're like, "This is such an exotic species. Oh my gosh." And I was like, hold on a second. You've got, sulfur crested cockatoos in the wild. You've got, all these species, these amazing birds. And they're like, "Those are just Aussie birds. Look at this beauteousness." And you can see why people love them so much when you see pictures like this. I mean, maybe many of us probably could have taken a picture like this in the last couple of days in our backyards quite easily. So they're incredibly popular because they're beautiful. The males catch your eye. Even the females catch your eye. Their song is very gorgeous. You see them going through, courtship, where males are feeding the females, and it all, they're just very eye-catching and very attractive to people. And so when I started getting ready to work on my dissertation at the University of Dayton, my doctoral advisor, Randy Brightwish, he was one of very few people who was working with Northern Cardinals really in any sort of kind of like very purposeful scientific way. And there's a lot about natural history out there and some information about ecology, but there really wasn't that much work that was being done with them. And as I said, Randy was doing the most. And so I was at first very interested in their ornamentation. And by that, I mean the bright colors or the intense colors that you see on the birds. So, and also any sort of like fancy feathers. So things like the tall head crest that you see on both the male and the female, this bright red orange bill, their black face mask, and the red coloration on the body, this brightest red area on the upper breast of the male. And then the females have red underwings, and I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. These are all traits that don't help individuals survive. They don't help individuals get more food or better food or anything along those lines. These are termed ornaments, and they have a very specific use, and that is in the process of sexual selection. So I'm going to give a little bit of some general biology here. So people are familiar with the concept of natural selection or naturally selected traits, things that help you survive for a long time, give you more chances to have more offspring. And really, that's the name of the game here is more offspring. Well, sexually selected traits can do this as well, but they don't help you live for a longer time or live at a higher quality of life. They just make you sexier. They're used in communication, and they can actually, in fact, shorten your life. So any predator worth its salt should be able to grab the train of a peacock, yank that down for a tasty dinner. But these traits that are used to get attention, they're used in two ways. They could be used in communication between members of the same sex, conveying information. We talk about this as intrasexual or within sex competition, and usually it's two males fighting with each other for access to females or the things that females want, the resources that females want. They could also be used in mate choice, and this is typically a female choosing who they're going to mate with based on these ornamental appearances. So like the eye spots in this peacock's train, or these blue bits that the satin bowerbird has put out in front of his bower. These are things that females would choose a mate with. Now, these are not just useless, kind of silly choices. These are not useless pretties. Ornaments actually say something. And this is where scientists come into things. So some of the classic studies about ornaments and how they're used were done by a researcher by the name of Jeff Hill at Auburn University, and he was working with house finches. And house finches can be very pink red, or they can be more orange or yellow. These are the males. And in captivity, he showed that when females were free to roam in an aviary and assess males, they would show behaviorally that they were really drawn and attracted to these pink red males. That's who they would prefer to associate with and mate with. Well, it turns out that a pink red male is eating very well. He doesn't have a lot of gut parasites. He's not ill. She doesn't need to know, oh, he is really, really red, so therefore he has many fewer gut parasites and he was eating this well during molt. She doesn't need to know that. She just needs to know, I want that red. The scientists are the ones who dig into what do these ornaments mean. So that's what I was interested in at first was these plumage colorations, how could they be functioning in communication between males, male cardinals, between two female cardinals, or between male and female cardinals? What could these be saying? With time, I moved into more physiology aspects. So with my postdoc and then during the entirety of my time as a faculty member at the University of Southern Mississippi, we were interested in hormones, testosterone, and the stress hormone corticosterone, and what these might mean to in physiology and behavior. And we have a ton of pictures of my student, Susan, with cardinals and blood samples. I don't know why that was a popular picture motif for us to take. So let me start putting together some kind of general stuff with what I've been doing. And we just kind of walk through some various things about Northern Cardinals. So this is a wide-ranging species. This is a slightly older map that actually comes from the Birds of North America species account. And actually, in the next coming weeks, the brand new Birds of the World Northern Cardinal species account should be coming out. I am a co-author on that. And the green is showing you everywhere where they're found year-round. And these four little red stars are places where I have done a lot of research with Northern Cardinals. In Ohio for my PhD, Indiana during my postdoc, Mississippi during my faculty days, and I'm even doing some work here now in Maryland. So it's a wide-ranging species, and this map is out of date because there's recorded populations up above the Great Lakes, definitely. They've been transplanted to Hawaii and Los Angeles and Baja California, and they're doing perfectly well there. I've seen them in Hawaii. They're non-migratory, although in Canada, they can be a little eruptive. And so in really bad winters, they seem to hop south. So I have a friend who lives just here above the Great Lakes area. He said in the really bad winters, you don't see cardinals. As soon as it gets nice again, they show back up. In really mild winters, they never really leave. I've been up in a mild winter in this area in about this time, 15 years ago. It was very mild, and cardinals were there and doing their thing. So they get a little eruptive, and it's with the severity of winters as they get far north. We have three species in the Cardinalis genus. We have the Northern Cardinal, the Pyrrhuloxia, or the desert cardinal, and then the vermilion cardinal, which is found in South America. I have pictures of everybody here. So here we have our Northern Cardinal. We're familiar with them, male and a female on this lower left of the screen. Over here on the right side of the screen, this is a male Pyrrhuloxia and this is a female Pyrrhuloxia. And yes, I took those pictures because I've done some work with this species as well. I felt it was incumbent upon me to do that. I have not had the pleasure of interacting with vermilion cardinals, but here we have a male vermilion cardinal on the upper left and a female vermilion cardinal next to him. And what you can see is that clearly these are related species. You see a lot of similarities between these three different species. One way in which the species differ is in the habitats that they inhabit. So a friend of a former student, mentee of mine, Angela, she was from Venezuela and she's seen vermilion cardinals in very dry areas. And Pyrrhuloxias are also found in very arid areas, very dry. Cardinals do not seem able to capitalize on the same extreme dryness that Pyrrhuloxias and vermilion cardinals can. So there is a difference in what sorts of environments they can capitalize on. So I'm going to work us through here kind of like a year in cardinals and throwing in ecology and behavior and ornaments and all those things as we go along. And on the left side of the screen, we've got an annual cycle. So the months of the year on the very outside. This first darker blue band is showing times when birds are moving around. And we don't see migration, but we see dispersal. We see dispersal of juvenile birds, young birds that are looking for territories to breed on. And we see this in the spring, but much, much more in the late fall. In this middle medium blue, I guess it's not really super blue, medium blue gray, we have breeding. And cardinals have a pretty broad breeding season from March until October. The outer black band here is when there's eggs, and the inner black band is when there's juveniles, nestlings or fledglings. More southern populations, like my Mississippi population, they would get started in March, definitely. And we would actually hear fledglings until well into October. More northern populations, they're a little bit more truncated, and they're truncated by low temperatures at night. We have to be past the time when you're seeing lots of temperatures go below freezing at night. Females, even though they may be on the eggs at night, they just can't, when it's freezing and you're getting heavy frost, they just can't keep the eggs warm enough to keep them above a lethal chill. And then this innermost ring, this light blue, this is when birds are molting, when they're changing over. And cardinals only go through one molt a year. Some folks have asked me that it seems like at first cardinals aren't as bright, like when they go through their molt, they look maybe a little a little dusky, a little like there's almost like a hazy kind of color about them. They don't look as red. And as we get here into like March and April, they seem to be redder. And that's not a trick of the eye. When cardinals first molt out brand new feathers, they have little tiny light gray feather tips on the end of that red. You can almost see a little bit of it here on this male. They have like light gray feather tips that almost seem like protection for that red color. And with time, those little light gray feather tips wear away. And as we get into March and April, they look really like fresher, brighter red. Now, the data that I'm going to be sharing with you all comes from banding data from myself and from others. That's a very, common way to get information about birds. I catch birds, cardinals in mist nets. This is me trying to get a bird out of a mist net and do it very gracefully, or walk-in traps. And here's an unhappy contestant in one of my walk-in traps. When we catch them, we're banding them, of course, U.S. Fish and Wildlife metal bands. The metal bands they're either aluminum or they're steel. Depends on, sometimes the U.S. Fish and Wildlife sends me steel bands, sometimes it's aluminum bands. They go back and forth on what they're going to use. And they have a very, very fine light number that is etched into them. Each band is unique. It's a unique number, series of numbers. And it's like giving the bird a social security number in a way. So they get a U.S. Fish and Wildlife band, but we also put these colorful plastic bands on them. And each bird gets a unique color combination. And so we can tell who this is from a distance, and we don't have to keep catching the bird again and again and again to see those really tiny little etched numbers. If I see a bird, I see dark green, silver over white, I know that's bird 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know when I caught him. I know all sorts of information about him. So we collect blood samples for hormones, for immune components. We collect size measures. We look at aspects of condition, like how much fat they're carrying on their body. You can just see it through their skin. And then we do, for their ornament measures, we measure them with a color reflectance spectrometer. And if you're thinking, wow, that almost looks like an advertisement picture for Ocean Optics, we sold it to them. So yes, they did use it in their advertising because it was perfect. Birds don't see color like we do. So we have 3 color cones, birds have 4. We have, both birds and humans, we have red, blue, and green color cones. But then birds like cardinals have a 4th color cone that perceives ultraviolet light, and it incorporates it into what they're seeing. So we don't really know how birds see color. We don't really know exactly what they see. The best guess is, if you and I could see 20 shades of blue, a bird could see 50. So we think it just gives them a richer, broader color experience. And we use a color reflectance spectrometer. We just record the reflectance across a wide spectrum of wavelengths, and we crunch that information into what is mathematically an avian appropriate color vision space. And that's what we use in our data. So some of the things that we found with cardinals, let's move into what we're seeing right about now. We're starting to see birds showing just the bare beginnings of kind of courtship behavior and territorial behavior, and just ever so slightly starting to move into that breeding season, and they're thinking about it. So we have information that pairs, males and females, show bidirectional courtship. So males show off to females, but it turns out that females show back off to males, right? So males sing. We starting to hear song already. They use that song to attract females to their territory, attract females to them, but also to repel other male cardinals from, like, don't come into my house, stay away. And then they do all these twisting and turning things where they're like showing off their ornaments to females. Well, females show off their ornaments right back. They have a thing that looks like someone opening a jacket. They open their wings up and show off the underwing plumage that they have that's very pink, red. Females check out territories because you're interested in what kind of house you might be moving into. And then there's a lot of duetting that goes on because female cardinals sing just as much as and just as well as males. Females duet with their new mates. They also sing in order to repel other females from moving onto the territory, coming into this new place that a female has set up shop. A researcher by the name, her last name's Vondrasek, she looked at song rates in female Northern Cardinals in new pairs versus more established pairs. So cardinals will mate together, not just, in most cases, not just for a single breeding season, but for many, many breeding seasons. And she found out that females in brand new pairs sing a whole lot more than females in more established pairs. And she proposed that this was to just let everybody know, I'm here, don't come over here. One of the things that I did with my Canadian collaborator, who I mentioned I was up in Canada several years ago working with Scott McDougall Shackleton, is we were looking at the song control system in Northern Cardinals. So songbirds like Northern Cardinals have a series of brain nuclei, clusters of cells in the brain that control the learning, the memory, and the production of song. And it's unique to the songbirds. In many species, females don't sing, and females are actually missing some parts of the song control systems in those species where females do not sing. Most bird species, songbirds, they don't sing in the winter in the non-breeding season. They sing in the spring and the summer during the breeding season, and that song control system actually grows and shrinks. It increases in size and activity when they're singing, and then it shrinks when they're not singing. It's a way for them to save energy since the brain is a very energetically expensive thing. And so what I found with Scott was that female Northern Cardinals, their song control system is identical to a male's. It doesn't differ in any way, shape, or form, and both sexes have very, very little seasonality. And that made sense to me because I hear cardinals singing I started hearing them in December here, a few of them definitely more in January, but at my Mississippi study site, we heard them singing year round. They never ever stopped. So to have very little seasonality in this and very little sex difference makes a whole lot of sense. So what did we start finding with the ornaments and how are ornaments working in these early days of courtship and doing things like setting up your territory? Well, we know that the red-orange coloration, so the red all on his body and his bill, same for females, this is coming from carotenoids, and carotenoids come from your diet. Animals cannot make them, plants make them. And the quality of your diet, how much carotenoid you're getting in your diet, and do you have any gut parasites or are you sick, can impact the quality, the brightness, the intensity of this color category, this color ornament. So cardinals are very good at taking any carotenoid they get, even something like lutein, which is light yellow, or beta carotene, which is orange, and they can enzymatically convert it into red and tuck it into their feathers. But if you aren't eating very well, or you're really sick, or you have gut parasites, even a cardinal who's very good at making anything into a red carotenoid, they just can't pigment their feathers very well. So this is a good indicator of some of your health condition. The black coloration, okay, this is melanin. This is made from the amino acid tyrosine, and your body does make this. It's what's in our hair, makes your hair brown, gives color into your skin. This is also impacted by diet, and it can be impacted by hormones. Now, we didn't see any correlation between testosterone and face mask coloration in males, but we did in females, which was quite interesting. Now, cardinals have multiple ornaments. They have this bright red orange bill, the black or blackish face mask, the red body coloration, and the tall head crest. And I found that we have multiple ornaments at play here, which was interesting and unusual because cardinals are a socially monogamous species. That means that a male and a female stay together for at least a breeding season. In the case of cardinals, more than one breeding season, and they work together to raise joint young. And we say socially monogamous because they're not strictly genetically monogamous. So males do look for outside the pair reproductive opportunities, as do females. So you don't expect socially monogamous species to have multiple ornaments, but cardinals do. Male ornaments are conveying information definitely on condition, okay, so how healthy he is, and to a lesser extent, behavior. And the behavior that male ornaments were really showing information on was parental care behavior, but it was sort of conditional. If redder males are better parents when environmental conditions are bad. So when food availability is really, really low, and we had this through a drought on my study site. When food availability was really low, males were really, really super good at feeding redder males were super good at feeding their young. So it's kind of like they're saying, I can be a great parent when times are really bad. I can do it when it counts. We also found that there is assortative mating. In brand new pairs, what we found is that the male's bill and his body coloration actually was very similar to his new mate's bill and her underwing coloration. And this is indicative of males and females checking each other out and, you know, that choice going back and forth. It wasn't just her choosing him, but he's actually actively choosing a mate as well. What we found in female cardinals is that they have this unique display where they open up their wings and they show this underwing area. Again, the reds are carotenoids, the black is melanin. We have this assortative mating. Female ornaments, again, the carotenoid ornaments are indicative of condition. They are also indicative of parental care behavior. And again, it is linked with this I can be a good parent when times are super tough sort of thing. But interestingly, the female face mask, what I found in Ohio was that females with a larger, darker face mask were really hyper aggressive about defending their nests. So, a little side thing here, cardinals in my Ohio population definitely do a thing called egg dumping, where female cardinals lay an egg in another cardinal's nest. And a fellow graduate student, Sue Linville, with my advisor, she had the genetic evidence of this. She had baby cardinals in a nest, and neither parent were related to it. That's kind of weird because baby cardinals are not that mobile. So it's not like they were coming over on their own, their own power. I had the behavioral evidence. I would be watching nests and I would see a female that was not the female who owned the nest I was watching. She'd come in and be, very, like looking around, kind of, and then she'd hop in the nest and assume this very classical egg laying posture. She'd grab an egg and leave. And so we had evidence that females were dumping eggs. So we did little intrusion trials where we put a model female cardinal by a nest and we let the nest owner come back and find it and show us what she was going to do. And we found that a female with a larger, darker mask was going to come in super hot and knock that model right off of its little block and take it to the ground and try to rip its head off. One actually did. Okay, that was very intriguing. We found I had a student readdress this in Mississippi because we were watching nests. We were doing something with egg laying order, and we didn't see any evidence of egg dumping. We never had a female approaching a nest that wasn't hers in Mississippi. And so I said to Caitlin Winters, my student, I was like, let's try this. Let's try it and see if the ornament thing holds here. And in Mississippi, it didn't. We didn't have any egg dumping, and female ornamentation, the face mask didn't say anything about defensive behavior. They defend their nests, but it didn't correlate with how aggressively they would do it. And we did find also, weirdly, that the female face mask Testosterone levels as females are going through molt actually match with how large and dark of a face mask they're going to produce. So this is clearly an ornament that can be impacted by a hormone, which can drive aggressive behavior. Testosterone is well known to drive aggressive behavior. But where we don't have a behavior of egg dumping and a need to defend the nest, there was no selection for some sort of signal to say, hey, don't come mess with my nest. So as we're moving into, moving through our upcoming spring, you're hearing the males sing, you're hearing females sing, they're showing their ornaments off to each other, pairs are getting together, they start to do their very cute courtship feeding. A lot of people like to see this. This is in large part, coordinating the activities of the male and the female as they're getting ready to go through nesting. That's part of it. Females may also be secondarily trying to see, is he a good enough provider by getting him to feed her? The song of Northern Cardinals is something that also catches a lot of people's attention, and it can be an ornament itself. But because cardinals have up to 10 song types, it's not that easy to study. So I just didn't have the time. I am one person alone to study plumage ornaments, multiple plumage ornaments, and song, because it takes thousands of hours of recording in order to get all of these song repertoires from everybody on a site. But other people have. We know that they have up to 10 song types that, as all songbirds, young individuals are learning as nestlings, and then they go through a practice phase and then they start singing. We hear song mostly in the morning, and the birdie, birdie, birdie call, this one right here, this is sonograms of some of their more common calls. We hear this mostly in the morning. The dawn chorus is very characteristic of songbirds. It's basically saying, I made it through the night, I'm still alive, I'm here, don't anyone come on my territory. Okay. Just letting everybody know. And we can hear song most commonly around here February through September, but in some areas like my study site in Mississippi, we heard song all year round. The sexes sound similar to you and I, but cardinals definitely tell the difference. So if you play female song to a pair, the female will react very strongly. She'll be like, what's going on there? And if you play male song to a pair, the male will react more strongly. To me, they sound the same, but cardinals can definitely tell a difference. And they use song for within pair communication. Sylvia Hulkin is a researcher who's been looking at this for a number of years, and she's shown that there's very strong communication that's used about feeding coordination, or even when females are incubating and males feed them on the nest, females will sing to kind of be like, hey, get yourself over here and get me some grub. As we're thinking about pairs coming together, we're also thinking about territory and defending the territory and pairs having a territory. So cardinals use multi-purpose territories. They use them for overwintering, they use them for breeding, they use them for molt, they don't ever leave. And so on all of my study sites, I've always been able to go out, and if both pair members are still alive, I can go to what is a known territory and they're still there. And cardinal territories don't change dramatically from year to year because the birds don't leave, and cardinals can live about 3 to 7 years. And so you're going to have the same next door neighbors for a good chunk of your life. And everybody knows where everybody lives. This is my territory, this is your territory. And so the boundaries very rarely, in the area of them, very rarely change unless something happens like deforestation or a burn, or, land is cleared. And so pairs are on the territories, they stay there year round, they're defending them together. And a good territory is a territory with lots of good nesting habitat, and that is dense, thick shrubs at about 5 to 9 feet in height. We did find that redder males have territories that are more densely packed with good nesting habitat, and redder males actually had smaller territories that were just jam-packed with good habitat. Why do they want so much good nesting habitat? Well, choice is great. They want a lot of shrubs. They like forest edges. And in fact, forest edge is the natural habitat for this species. They like forest edge. That's where they nest. What else likes forest edge? Predators. Cardinals have their nests have a lot of predators. Cardinals are not strong defenders of their nest. They just re-nest really fast. So we have recorded nest predation rates of about 70%. 70% of nests get eaten by mice or other small mammals, snakes, other birds. Cardinals don't really do anything to defend them. They just build another nest really fast. And cardinals will readily adopt the plantings around our houses as being enough of an edge-like habitat that it works for them. They're very not specific in terms of what they want to nest in, what they want to eat, and what they feed their nestlings. Now, I'll go back one. This was my student, Susan. Susan, her statement was she liked angry things, and so she wanted to know more about their territoriality. We did a lot of simulated territory intrusions. So this is one of our models. This is a taxidermied cardinal that had hit a window. They were all named Norman. I don't know why my students named all of them Norman, but they were Norman. This is Angry Norm. We also had a singing Norm who was arranged with his bill open like he was singing. You can do a simulated territory intrusion where you put a model like Norman here out and you play recorded song. And we had recorded song from the region, but not from our population. And we were simulating territory intrusions, controlled territory intrusions, where we put Norm out, we have song playing, the male that we're targeting comes in and reacts like Norm is a real live cardinal, displays at him, sings at him, tries to attack him, and then we catch him. Susan was interested in how does testosterone correlate with aggressive behavior. And we focused on male intrusions because males are much more obvious about how they intrude. Males come onto a territory and they're like, hello, and they sing. And then the owner of the territory comes up and is like, hey, I'm here. And a fight may ensue. And sometimes we saw really, really dramatic fights that went on for hours and sometimes even days. Females do this very differently. Females kind of skulk in and they're sneaking around and they're looking and looking and looking, and they don't make any noise. And if they get discovered, a fight's going to ensue. But we never found a way to mimic and simulate the female territory intrusion like we could with the males. So we focused on male intrusions on territories and female intrusions at nests. So what we found is that, males will come in and be very aggressive sometimes to an intruder. Sometimes they won't be. Sometimes they'll sing at it and then they'll just go away. Females will join males. They'll come in and they'll take part of it. Here are a pair of females duking it out in that's actually Central Park. That's not a unique thing about New York birds. They can be that nasty everywhere. And when Susan was looking at testosterone, what she found is that sometimes testosterone was elevated. It didn't correlate with aggression in any way, shape, or form. It almost seemed to be divorced from the aggressive behavior, and she was quite disappointed. But science is science, you report your findings. And what I started doing with my last master's student, Kaylee Gentry, is we started looking at these intrusions in a different way. So with Susan, we had always been doing your very standard, your very typical, the stranger intrusion, which is what everybody does in these types of studies. Kaylee and I decided to turn it on its head. We were like, well, cardinals will fight with their neighbors a lot, and their neighbors are always there. Let's see if they distinguish between a neighbor intruding on their territory and a stranger intruding on their territory. So we recorded song from the study site. We recorded song from off the study site. If here's a male's territory, we would play the song from the territory right next door on our focal male's territory. And then we would play stranger song on that same focal male's territory later. And what we found is that when it came to a known neighbor versus a stranger, focal birds were much, much more hyper aggressive about a known neighbor than a stranger. Stranger, they kind of come in and be like, go away. Known neighbor, they'd come in and they would be down on the speaker where the song was playing, trying to find that bird, ready to knock over the speaker if they could. They were just losing it. And we proposed that because neighbors are always there, your neighbor's always there, your neighbor knows what you have, your neighbor knows when you're having an off day, and maybe your neighbor could take some of your yard away from you, that you have to be hyper vigilant against your neighbor in this case because they're always there and they're always pushing and they're always trying. Whereas strangers are like, oh, I don't know what you have. I'm not, I don't think it's worth the fight. So I'm just going to go find another territory easier. And in fact, we even started to see with the few birds that we captured to look at testosterone, that their testosterone was elevating when they were defending their territory against a known neighbor than when they were defending their territory against a stranger. So that is kind of where that aspect of the research ended because that's when I started at the National Science Foundation. In fact, my student Susan DeVries, who's at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, is picking some of this stuff back up now as a faculty member to start digging into this. How do neighbors and strangers function in cardinals? Because they seem to see their neighbors as the bigger threat, and that's a pretty cool finding. So just kind of wrapping up here, we know that pairs stay on the territory year round, or wrapping up with this bit. We know that in some populations that they'll actually defend their territories year round. Definitely in Mississippi they did, but in Indiana, I had birds defending their territories from simulated territory intrusions and snowstorms. So, okay. And they very rarely move to a new territory, only if something better opens up very easily, or if their territory is completely annihilated. So one of my study sites, a parking lot was built on part of my site. Clearly that's gone, and those birds had to move. They didn't move far, but they had to move. So once they get that very all-important territory, the male and the female work together quite strongly to defend it. And pairs will even coordinate their behavior, and both pair members will respond. So this is a little graph showing behavioral scores for males across the x-axis and for females across the y. These are pair members responding to a male simulated intrusion. A higher score means more aggressive. What we found is that if a male is hyper aggressive and he's going to come in and he's going to attack and he's going to actually physically make contact with the intruder, the simulated intruder we're putting up there, his mate is right there, wing and wing, ready to just be part of it. And if he's going to, that's like a 5. If he's going to just kind of come in and be like, oh, hey, go away and sing a little bit, she's going to hang back and be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to sing too. So they match their behavior and they work together to defend this very, very important territory. So now we've got mates, shown our ornaments off, we've got our territory, we've defended it from all comers. The next big thing is nesting. That's the name of the game. Got to get more of the little cardinal babies out there. And they're so hideously ugly, they're adorable. So cardinals are a cup nesting species. They do hide their nests in denser foliage. They like this 5 to 9 foot. There's a nest right there. There's years and years and years that I have been looking for cardinal nests, and I'm highly effective. I've got that search image. We did lots and lots of searching, lots and lots and lots of observation, because we would watch incubation. We would look at how females defend their nests. We would look at parents feeding the offspring. This is one of my students. I made them go sit in the woods to take a picture of them, but we would be out there in full turkey hunting gear to hide from the cardinals. People would walk right by us. Cardinals sort of knew we were there. They looked like, something seems a little out of place. I'll keep doing my thing, but I think there's something over there. People, not so much. And the nest finding, my students would get so angry with me because I could walk around and be like, oh, I hear nesting behavior. go over there and look. And they'd be like, did you know the nest was over there? I'd be like, no, I can just do it by behavior now. And they would get so angry, but then they would get good at it and they could do it by behavior as well. So this is your very classic cardinal nest. It's about the size of a small grapefruit, healthy sized orange. You always see kind of like grape bark wrapped around the outside of it, a nice lining of grass, very, very fine twigs. Um, Towhee nests are grassier. Another nest that you can often find, like brown thrashers, the twigs are a little bit bigger. And these are your very classic cardinal eggs, just your very general wild bird eggs. They nest from March to September, depends on the population, and low temperatures are influential. With these high depredation or predation rates on the nests, all sorts of predators, snakes are a big predator, birds, blue jays are a big predator, small mammals, chipmunks, a big one. They don't actively defend the nest so much as they re- just nest repeatedly and quickly. And I've seen up to 10 nests from a single pair in a season. They lay anywhere from 2 to 5 eggs, usually about 2 eggs. So they're literally not putting all their eggs in one basket. It's like, we'll dole them out because we know we're going to lose some. Incubation is up to 12 days. Nestling life, they're altricial when they first hatch. They're completely helpless. Brains aren't fully formed, eyes aren't fully formed. They can't even maintain their own body temperature at a single high temperature. They're in the nest for about 10 days. They double in size every day, and the parents are just putting tons and tons of food in them. Females incubate. Males do not participate in incubation. Males will feed females on the nest. We know that redder males are not better providers of females on the nest, but we know that redder females start incubating or start, excuse me, nesting earlier in the season, and they're more consistent incubators. Both sexes will provide food to the nestlings, and they'll do this both will take part after females have, or after the nestlings, excuse me, have gotten to the point where they can actually maintain their own body temperature constantly. So a big bulk of work has been done on parental care behavior because they're just their care behavior is just, it's so cute. It's attractive to scientists because it's cute even to us. And so we know things like more ornamented females, redder females are better incubators. They start their nests earlier in the year. They just have a slightly longer breeding season, one more chance to get successful offspring produced. More ornamented females are better nest defenders. When there's nest parasitism, more ornamented males and females are better parents, particularly when food's limited. The pairs do about 50-50 on the workload when they're both feeding the nestlings. Males actually do a little bit more. It's more like 55-45. The sexes communicate. They sing to each other to coordinate the care behavior, to draw each other in to come and provide some food, or even to warn each other away from the nest. And through time, activities change. And so females alone are sitting on the nest. They don't do a lot of feeding for the first couple of days of nestling life because the nestlings can't thermoregulate. And about 5 days in, females are now helping to feed because the nestlings have enough feather covering and they're more matured and they can finally, maintain a body temperature. Then both sexes are feeding. I would say these nestlings are about 8 to 9 days old. So they're just on the edge of getting ready to hop out of the nest. Once they fledge, what we see is, there we go. Did I miss one? I did not. Okay. Once they fledge, what we see is that males take over the care of the fledglings. Males start feeding the fledglings for, first couple of weeks, first week definitely that they're out of feed themselves. Okay, hopefully I don't get logged out. My computer just told me something that it's done with its VPN access. Um, I have seen males adopting other fledglings. So we had a pair that They had success early on. They had 2 fledglings, and then they never had another successful nest in that season. And then all of a sudden, this male's got 5 fledglings following him, and then he's got 8. And by the end of the season, he had like 15 fledglings following him around begging for food. And this guy would be flying, he'd be like looking over his shoulder, like, God, go away. And they'd all be like, feed me, you know. So they will do this. They'll adopt fledglings if they don't have any more of their own young to take care of. But males start feeding the fledglings, females start turning to the new nesting attempt. And soon as there are new nestlings, males stop caring for the fledglings and they boot them off their territory. The very, very last fledglings that a pair produces in a year can be allowed, often is allowed to stay on the natal territory with their parents. There we go. So fledglings are on the territory with their parents for a little bit. They look like this at first. This is a fairly fresh fledgling. They start to lose that puffy, fluffy looking juvenile plumage and putting on more classic true feathers, uh, recognizable feathers. They go through their in the fall, their first really good molt. They change over all their body feathers. They typically don't change over their wing or their tail feathers in that first molt. Those are very expensive feathers to build. And juveniles, they're teenagers at this point. They're not that great at taking care of themselves. And so you'll start to see very scrappy looking birds in the fall where they're spotty and funky. After they go through that first molt, it's very hard to age them unless you banded them as juveniles, and then you know exactly how old they are. So most times you just have to guess. This is an after hatch year bird. I don't quite know how old it is. And young of the year will flock together because more together, you've got more eyes looking for predators, it's safer, and you've got more eyes looking for food. And so you've got a better chance. So cardinals just keep going through and they keep going through and going through and producing as many nests as they can. As I have said, high predation rate. I've seen up to 10 nests in a year, but I've seen cardinals have up to 4 successful fledglings in a year. So they are producing quite a few additional individuals. So they're having success. And we just keep going through the breeding season until we start getting into the fall and it starts cooling down and food availability starts to change. Now, feeding behavior, I'll often have people ask me about weird things they've seen, like this stuff over here on the left side of the screen. We've got this male cardinal who's actually feeding koi goldfish. What's going on here? So feeding behavior in birds is driven by the hormone prolactin. And as females sit on eggs, as individuals see that open baby mouth begging, there's this hormonal drive of, whoa, mouth, food, got to put food in it, you know, and this is going to be a very strongly selective drive. And it makes sense because little tiny baby birds that are altricial, that are helpless, they're naked, they can't move, they're not coordinated, they're not going to go out and get their own food. So the parents have to do it. So there's this hormonal mechanism that just makes it a fail safe. Well, this leads to crazy situations like this guy. He probably doesn't have any babies to take care of, and he just wants to feed, and so he's doing it. I've actually seen cardinals, males, not males and females. I take that back. I've seen pictures of females doing this too, feeding other species, not necessarily koi, but like sparrows. They're like, okay, here's food. Cowbirds actually capitalize on this in all species. So cowbirds are a nest parasite. They lay their eggs in everybody else's nest. They don't build their own. They don't take care of their own young. Those young will then capitalize on this hormone-driven feeding behavior of their host, and they will get food from their host parents. Some species, cowbirds, are very damaging. Kirtland's warblers, habitat loss, and cowbirds combining to just decimate their populations. Cowbirds don't do well with cardinals. I've seen a lot of cowbirds actually starve to death in cardinal nests. They just can't seem to compete with them. Cardinals grow faster and leave the nest faster. So when cardinals go through molt, they're building new feathers, they're putting carotenoids in them. This is kind of your scrappy juvenile. Sometimes I see adults looking like this as well. You can see some weird molts and plumages on cardinals. This yellow guy here, this is actually a bird that enzymatically can't make red carotenoids. So he's a northern cardinal, he's Cardinalis cardinalis, he gets carotenoids, but he doesn't have the enzyme capability, and this is mutation, to take it beyond this intense yellow coloration. This bird is partially leucistic, so it can't put color into its feathers, just but in some parts of its body. This individual here is what we call a bilateral gynandromorph. They are male on one half of their body and female on the other half of their body, and this is something that happens with weird cell division during embryonic development. This individual is probably infertile. A lot of people ask me about the bald cardinals. Okay, they look very like the Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. When we have caught bald cardinals, and this is temporary, their feathers grow back. We've actually taken little skin samples. They seem to have a very strong fungal infection in the skin, and then they get over it, and the feathers grow back. So why just cardinals? Because I don't see this in too many other species. I don't have an answer for that. I just know that it seems to be linked to a fungal infection. So once we're done with the breeding season, okay, cardinals have wrapped it up for the year. They're going to stay on, and they go through molt. They're going to stay on their territory. They're going to join flocks occasionally. It's like you and me going out to eat. We go get something to eat. We come back home. New pairs may develop. Mostly pairs stay together, but new pairs can develop. You've got these juveniles who are all there, and now they're just kind of in that waiting pattern until it's time to begin the next breeding season. And you get to see on snowy days like we've had, really, really great pictures like this. I did not take that picture. I think it's a fantastic picture, but we're just kind of now in our waiting pattern. And this is part of what makes cardinals so wildly attractive to people. Now I'll just say just a couple of things about testosterone, and then I'll wrap it up. I have slides. If anyone's like, I want to see data, I have them. But, I focused on testosterone a lot. We still look at it in cardinals. Bulk of my research is focused on this as a faculty member. So a few interesting things I'll throw out there. Cardinals, male and female cardinals, have matching levels of hormones. Testosterone, really high testosterone for a female, really low testosterone for a male, identical between the sexes. And it doesn't vary across the year. Most seasonally breeding birds, it's really high in the spring, and then it's just basically not measurable in the non-breeding season. Cardinals, it's always there, just uniform across the year. Doesn't seem to impact aggression, at least not with strangers, probably with neighbors. Doesn't negatively impact parental care. Most species, high testosterone makes individuals bad parents. They're more focused on trying to find mates or being angry. Cardinals doesn't seem to knock their parental care behavior off at all. Interestingly, temperature is influential. When it's generally warmer, their testosterone levels are generally higher. So I don't know what that means for global climate change. And I think that year-round aggression that we can see in cardinals is some part of this, why we have this testosterone year-round. But again, that's kind of where my research stopped as I moved to NSF, and where some of my former students are picking things up. And with that, so here are some of my former students out here in a rare snow in Mississippi that caused massive pandemonium. And I'm more than happy to handle any questions at this point. I hope I shared some interesting information for everybody. And I'll go ahead and I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see folks and I can see questions. So Tiffany, how do you like to do this? Do you want me to read out questions, or what would you like?
Well, if you'd like to do it that way, you can. I can also read them for you if that's easier. Which would you prefer?
I'll go ahead and I'll read out some things here. So David is asking if I look at the color space of the birds, predators and prey. And so I do not, I have not. There are folks who do that sort of research, not with cardinals, but there is a lot of also interesting work about what do their foods look like, and then what can their predators see. And mammalian predators are a lot like us, tricolor vision. Maybe they have better night vision than we do. Reptilian predators, they've got a little bit better in the far red. So there's some really interesting work that's being done by a wide variety of people of what exactly do other animals see, and what do plants look like to them, and what do eggs look like to them, or but I did not look at that with the cardinals.
Thank you.
And then trying not too hard to defend something, I was saying they don't defend their nests really, really strongly. They just re-nest really, really fast. Okay, let's see. How can we keep them from fighting with their window images? So Gwen and Larry, yes, this is a question I get from a lot of people because they do that, right? So, and someone said put something that blocks their reflection, and that's it exactly. They can see this reflection and they don't realize it's themselves, right? They just see the audacity of this intruder on my territory. How dare they? And so they'll keep going and they'll keep going and they'll keep going. They're just like, this guy is back again. Oh my God. And if you can break up the reflection, some people put like the little window clings. Some people have they've had to go as far as putting like a sheet or a towel or something to just stop that reflection. Most cases, many times, once the individual who's attacking themselves has nestlings to take care of, they stop doing that. Not always, but sometimes. But you've got to really try to break up that reflection. That is really the only way to do it. And hopefully they'll lose interest. Cynthia's asking, how long does it take for the beak color to change to that adult orange color? And it only takes, I'd say it takes a couple of months. I will catch birds, known juveniles, 3 or 4 months after they've gotten their adult plumage, and they might still have a little bit of like kind of dark coloration in the upper mandible, but it changes over very fast. And yes, 10 nests is 10 broods. So 10 broods for Melissa asking, 10 nests a season, does that mean 10 broods? Yep. So we've had females who have produced up to 20 eggs in one breeding season. Let's see here. Okay, Kathy Bobiak, I hope I'm not saying your last name wrong, is asking, in Mississippi, where the females don't drop eggs or territory, do they still have the variation in the darkness of the face mask? They do, yes. So we see wide variation, everything from, in all of my populations, everything from just a bare rim around the bill to like this big blackish face mask like a male possesses. So we still have that variation in the ornament. We just don't have that correlation with the defense of the nest behavior. Someone's asking, do cardinals have a sense of smell? They do, yes. Now, I don't know how good that sense of smell is. So it was long thought that birds don't have a particularly robust or accurate sense of smell, except for a few groups. So the vultures actually find their food carrion by smell. And it was thought that birds in general don't have a good sense of smell because the olfactory bulbs in their brain aren't very big. But it turns out that they do have a sense of smell. And there's a lot of work that's been done with, with juncos, Danielle Whitaker has been doing work with the volatiles that come out of the preen gland oil. So birds have a little like pimple-like structure at the top of their tail called a preen gland, and it creates oils, and they gather that oil up and they put it in their feathers, and it has antimicrobial properties. It also has, which protects the feathers, it has like a waterproofing ability. Danielle has found that there's volatile chemicals that come off of this preen gland oil, and there's some indication that birds are actually, in juncos, are using this in mate choice. So she actually just offered cotton swabs soaked in preen gland oils, and females were drawn to these cotton swabs soaked in preen gland oils and reacting to them. And there's also some work, it's with one of the shorebirds, one of the not puffins, I can't think what shorebird it is, but they have a citrusy smell, and part of their mate choice behavior is they get into each other's feathers and they sniff. Now, birds have a different scent to me. So like, I can smell them, and like Pyrrhuloxias smell like Christmas. They smell like berries and wood smoke. And cardinals they smell kind of funky. They don't necessarily smell the best. And there was a lot of, when I said that in my postdoc lab, and I said something about, well, yeah, haven't you ever noticed that juncos, we were working with dark-eyed juncos as well as cardinals, like, haven't you ever noticed that dark-eyed juncos smell different in the summer and the winter? And my postdoc boss was like, what? And I'm like, have you not huffed a junco? I mean, come here, smell it. She's like, I don't smell it. So not everybody smells it, but they may be. And there's evidence suggesting that they are using this in mate choice. Where are nests located? Bushes, trees, or low to the ground? So they are typically in bushes, okay? I occasionally see them in trees, but usually bushes or trees that are like, we have a holly tree in our backyard that we've never really trimmed, and so it's got a lot of like dense stuff low down on the trunk. And in that 5 to 9 foot is the average, and usually a little bit in from the edge of the bush or the untrimmed tree. But I've seen them as low as a foot off of the ground. They're not ground nesters, but I've seen them as low as a foot off of the ground and as high as 25, 30 feet off the ground. So they have a wide range, but you mostly see them in bushes about 5 or so feet. That's the best kind of area that you're going to see them in. All right. Any other questions? Oh, where do I do my work in Maryland? The work in Maryland is right here in Fort Washington. Actually, it's here in my neighborhood, which is easy for me, and also down in Accokeek. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually working with a couple of collaborators. I have a collaborator at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, that's Susan DeVries, one of my former graduate students. We've got a collaborator who's in New York. I have a collaborator who's in Florida, down in almost the Fort Lauderdale area, excuse me. And then I'm here, and we're actually across the whole species range in these areas. We're looking at stress hormones in urban and rural populations. My population in Accokeek is on a little horse farm, and that's be more rural. My neighborhood is a little more urban. We're looking at immune components, we're looking at ornamentation, we're looking at stress hormones, the glucocorticoids, and we're looking at body size, because what we're finding is a nice clear signature that cardinals in the south are structurally smaller than cardinals in the north, and we want to see how fast that gradient of size changes. And do cardinals have a favorite food? I don't think they do. So cardinals they eat everything. And that's something I shouldn't have mentioned about, they feed their nestlings everything as well. So cardinals eat seeds. Cardinals, I've seen them eating slugs. I've seen them eating plant parts. I've seen them eating eggs. So I guess that's a bird part. And when it comes to feeding their nestlings, they will feed nestlings anything, because they chop it up with those bills and they turn it into baby food. And so we've seen cardinals foraging for their young and just insects, it doesn't matter, everything. We've tried, and this sounds like it's mean, but it's not. You put like a little pipe cleaner collar around the nestling's throat. You're not choking it, but you're trying to stop the bolus of food from going past it so you can see what they're feeding. We can't do that with cardinals because they feed their nestlings baby food. It's liquid. And so their molt, when they're going through molt, they do forage a little bit. I have to cough. Hold on one second. Excuse me. When they're going through molt, they do seem to forage more heavily for wild grapes. So wild grapes seem to have the carotenoids that they're really looking for. Sue Linville, one of the things that she did is she actually followed them around during molt and watched what they were eating in our Ohio population, and she saw that they really upped the fruit content of their diet. So if you have grapes, wild grapes on your property, you might want to keep them around. That could be very attractive for cardinals. Okay, so if you found an empty nest and they take it, would you be depriving the birds of the home? No. They do create a new nest every single time. So they don't reuse old nests. Now, they will reuse old nest sites. So I've had situations where a nest, it's built, whatever happens, happens. The nest over the next couple of years just breaks down, it falls apart from rain and snow and wind and everything. But it was a really nice spot. And a cardinal builds in that spot again, but they don't reuse any of that old nest material. Julie and Nick Clark are asking, are cats a problem? Cats can be a problem, yes. Cats can be a problem for any of our birds. Cats are pretty indiscriminate in what they're getting. If you have a cat, indoor cat that you let out, even though you feed it, they're going to hunt. If we had a feral cat problem in my neighborhood, no longer. I took care of that. They were really knocking out all bird species. So for all birds, cats are problematic. And Gwen and Larry are asking, do cardinals get any diseases? They can, they do, yes. Cardinals are very robust, it turns out. So we know that they can get avian malaria, and they pick that up from mosquitoes, but it doesn't seem to kill them. It doesn't seem to hurt them. And in fact, they clear malarial infections from their system. Cardinals will get West Nile. In fact, one of my former master's students is now working for a Louisiana mosquito control district in one of the parishes there, but he's the bird guy. And they're looking at West Nile disease, and they're looking at when do cardinals get it? Cardinals, they get it and they get over it. There's a pair of researchers, Marty Martin, they were looking at, they wanted to look at experimentally infecting cardinals with West Nile disease in captivity. And I know that sounds, I saw someone just go, oh no. They wanted to see the course of the disease, and they needed birds that had never had West Nile disease. Every single juvenile they caught had already had it, and they were doing absolutely fine. And so my former student, Matt, and I, we've talked about this many a time in what he's doing with his mosquito control work, or in that work. What we think is happening is that cardinals are picking up West Nile primarily when they're nestlings. They're in these shady areas where mosquitoes are at. They get bit by mosquitoes. Matt took all these videos of females incubating and counting the mosquitoes on the females, and then he was counting the mosquitoes on the babies, and he's like, I would lose track. There's so many mosquitoes on these poor things. And we think they pick it up when they're babies, but they don't get super sick and die from it like some of the corvids do. And they just get over it and they just go on with life. And so we actually saw surprisingly few diseases that knocked them down, and we saw surprisingly few parasites. So I did a study looking at gut parasites, and I I didn't see any gut parasites. Sue did blood smears for the malarial parasites. She saw very, very few. And someone's asking, how do they get parasites? So malarial parasites from mosquitoes, just like we could get malaria. So an infected mosquito bites a cardinal. Some of the plasmodium parasite in the mosquito gets transmitted to the cardinal. But other parasites, like gut parasites, they're foraging on the ground. They encounter other species' feces. And if that other individual had parasites, they might walk in it, pick it up in their food, ingest it. That's how that can happen. Feather parasites, they can pick this up from vegetation. They can pick this up from interacting with other birds. Nests usually get a lot of feather parasites kind of built up into them. And feather parasites are just feather mites and feather lice. You can see them, on the feathers. They'll chew little holes in the feathers, and they'll actually just compromise the feathers. And my sister-in-law, the only thing my sister-in-law ever wanted to ask me about birds was she wanted to know if when she was a kid, her mom would always say, "Don't touch that bird, it'll give you lice." And she's like, "Would that have happened?" I'm like, "Actually, no, because bird lice don't like mammals. You could have picked it up and been like, "Arr." And she felt very betrayed. And I was like, "Okay, I'm sorry that I went there with that." But so that's how they can pick them up, usually just from the environment. And the gut parasites, Giardia or roundworms. Giardia, that's what I was looking for, was Giardia, and I didn't see it. And I don't know about roundworms. I have not seen, I never saw evidence of like worms in the gut or worms kind of in the skin or anything along those lines. I mean, we've seen injuries on birds, but on cardinals, but we just surprisingly did not see that many parasites on or in cardinals. They were actually pretty clean and pretty robust, and that was very interesting. Injuries happen. Cardinals, all wild birds, are very, very robust with respects to injuries. I've seen some things where it's just like, wow, I don't think I as a human would have gotten through that very well. But cardinals, they just keep on rolling. So I think that we're at our questions there.
Yes, I was looking. Are there any final questions for Dr. Jawor? I think that's it. That's in the chat box. If anyone wants to ask anything live here, you can do that quickly. Wow. I don't hear anyone. Yes, thank you so very much for
everyone.
Joining us tonight. I learned so very much.
Well, thank
you. This was awesome.
Yes. And thank you for hanging in there. I hope I didn't go over too long. And
oh no, not at all. We had this time set aside until 8:30. If folks were really interested and had enough questions, thank you for hanging in with us and answering everyone. It's just fascinating. I'm helping with the Breeding Bird Atlas, and I feel like I have so much more information to try to find cardinal nests now this coming spring season. And I will definitely be putting it to use. Thank you again for joining us. I hope everyone has a good evening.
Thank you. That was terrific.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, are Gwen and Larry going to hang on for just 1 second? Can we keep this open?
Okay, sure. I'll keep it open.
Should we kill snakes and cowbirds to protect them? So cowbirds, even though they're damaging, are a native species, so they are a protected species, even though they're damaging. And so you don't want to go around killing protected species because that can get you in trouble. And snakes, so I know a lot of people want to kill snakes. I wouldn't, I don't. So cardinals have faced a lot of heavy nest predation the entirety of their existence, right? I mean, because they've always been edge specialists, and that's where things like cowbirds and snakes and mammals and all these things are at. And so that's why we see that females maybe have 2 or 3. We know they can have up to 5, but they just have 2. and they can re-nest after they lose a nest within a week. And they're not in any way, shape, or form a species where the population numbers are decreasing. So I would say, I wouldn't recommend going around to kill all sorts of things. Yeah, cowbirds suck, but they are protected. Snakes do a lot of good things, right? They get mice and all those things that come into your house that you don't want. So I would just leave it be, would be my recommendation. I even leave venomous snakes alone. I like to pick them up and look at them, but then I'm like, you go do your thing. So.
Awesome. Thank you again. And thank you to all our attendees. This has been wonderful, and it's been great to have so many participating. I hope you'll join us next month, also on March 3rd. We will have a speaker talk with us about, let me give you the title, Vulture, the Private Life of an Unloved Bird, at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, March 3rd, with the author Katie Fallon. So take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.